Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Paul Cowling. Welcome to the Los Angeles Film Festival, presented by Film Independent. Applause cue. Thank you. Before we start, a big thank you to our sponsors, our presenting media sponsor, the Los Angeles Times, and our presenting venue sponsor, the Regal Cinemas 14 at LA Live. And also a big thank you to Kodak for sponsoring this particular event. It's nice to be able to actually celebrate film at a film festival. This is one of the few programs we're doing here at the festival this year where we're actually screening 35mm prints, which is, sad to say, but at least we're still, at least the same doesn't go for actually film capture. There's still a lot of movies that are shot on film, and we're big proponents of that. So if you wanted to learn more about possibly shooting your own movies on film, speak to Lorette Bayle, who's going to be moderating this after the panel. She can set you up with your 35mm deals. Yeah. Or Super 16. And finally, a big thank you to the whole team of volunteers here, all the people in the red T-shirts. We couldn't do it without you guys, so I think they deserve a big sitting ovation. To say I'm excited about tonight, or today, is a bit of an understatement. We've got one of the great cinematographers of our time who's not only shot amazing movies on 35mm, but also IMAX, a lot of IMAX in The Dark Knight Rises. To introduce him, I'm going to introduce our moderator today. She's the studio and indie features account manager for Kodak. Please welcome Lorette Bayle.
Well, first I want to say thank you for taking the time to come out today. I know all of us have very busy lives, and this is a Saturday. You could be at the beach today, it's so beautiful, but you're here watching movies with us, and thanks for coming. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce one of the greatest filmmakers of our time, Wally Pfister. He's been nominated for BAFTAs and Academy Awards, in fact 4 Academy nominations, and he won for Inception. Yeah, exactly. He is a filmmaker that has definitely kept his part of him in independent filmmaking and obviously in major studio films. We're going to talk more about his history in filmmaking, and I'd love to bring up Wally Pfister.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Wally, we're going to start off looking at the trailer for Dark Knight Rises. That's one of the first things that we're going to take a look at, and my sense is that maybe we should just jump into that. I mean, do you want to preface for that, though? And you've just been working on the IMAX prints this morning.
You can't throw a rock without hitting a poster for it, so we might as well just to get everybody going. This is the last thing that I did, and we actually finished the timing about an hour ago on the IMAX prints. And we shot 60 minutes of native IMAX, 65mm on this.
That's in the film.
In the film, yeah 60 minutes of final.
I reminded him that he
film.
shot slightly under 1 million feet of 65mm on this film.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we're
And
trying to
35,
keep
of
film
course.
alive. I think we single-handedly
Yeah,
kept
exactly.
Kodak floating us. But that's how strongly we believe in film and film capture. So a lot of that's reflected in this trailer. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this trailer, but I think we should just go ahead and run the
Let's do it.
the
So
latest
we'll run
trailer
the trailer
for Dark Knight Rises.
Thanks. Well, Wally, we wanted to start off by talking about how you got going, but it's a perfect segue because you can tell us how you came to meeting Christopher Nolan.
I had been doing, we talked about this, I'd been doing a lot of kind of crap exploitation stuff right out of film school. I did a lot of movies at Roger Corman's, and my first film as a DP was, I shot there in 1990, a horror picture called The Unborn, the original Unborn. I worked with the same group of guys over and over again. I went to I was at AFI a year after Janusz Kaminski was there, and we became friends. And he introduced me to Fade and Papa Michael, and the three of us worked on each other's films. And another one in that group was Mauro Fiore, who was also. So we all worked on each other's films, supported each other, helped each other get jobs, and hired each other. So that we all kind of, wallowed around in low budget for a while. Janusz, I think, was the first one to get lucky. He got a couple of slightly larger movies that caught the attention of Spielberg and got Schindler's List based on those. And I continued to do kind of the crap low budget stuff for a little while. And then it was really a film that called The High Line that I did in 1997, 98 that helped me break out. And I kind of held out for a little while and didn't do the horror pictures and the exploitation stuff to try to brand myself better. And was able to get this small independent film called The High Line. And we shot it in Montana in the winter of 1997 and shot it on film with a $300,000 budget. So I think you can still do that. I really believe it. And that was the film that caught the attention of Chris Nolan. He had following his first movie at Slam Dance that year.
And the High Line was at Sundance.
High Line was at Sundance in competition. And so he saw that and liked my work and kind of set off that relationship.
Well, I think, though, when you were shooting The High Line, a point that you made, and I've heard you speak many times, obviously, and I remember you mentioning that while you were shooting that film, you were paying your mortgage with your credit card.
Yeah. I took, as I said, I wanted to get away from the low budget, get away from all the crap films after about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of doing that sort of thing. And I was in a tough situation where I was making money as a camera operator, but needed to do something, to get me back into shooting films again. But I didn't want to go back to exploitation. So the High Line, really, as I said, they made it for $300,000. So it was a very, I think we shot it in 20 days, and I read the script and thought it was a really interesting script, and it was very much an indie film, and so that it was something I was very interested in taking a cut and pay to do. At the time, I had 2 small children and a mortgage, and in order to afford to do it, I paid for 2 months' mortgages on a credit card. So I think I was paying 22% interest or something, and was completely broke by the time we finished it. But it was an investment that paid off, obviously, because that's what Chris saw. But that's what you have to do. That's what filmmakers have to do. You have to, if you really believe in something, you have to go with your heart, and you've got to, first do, first look at it creatively first, and then, the money will follow if you're clever about it. Yeah. But you really have to be clever about protecting your work, your reputation, your style.
And then Memento was the first film you did with Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, so we did Memento. We shot Memento in 1999, and we did that picture. It was a $5 million budget, I think, and did that in 25 days. And Chris cleverly, they told him he had to. The film was scheduled for 30 days to be shot in Canada, and Chris traded 5 days of shooting to be able to shoot it here in Los Angeles. And I think that really became part of the look and the feel of the movie too. We shot stuff in San Pedro, shot quite a bit of it in Burbank, and that really became a part of that film, I think. So Excellent. It was a great fight on Chris's part, right at a time too when people were getting really upset about films going to Canada.
And then Insomnia was.
And then Insomnia following that, and so that was. For us, our kind of foray into bigger budget and bigger, talent. It was Al Pacino and Robin Williams, and we're going to see the first reel of that film today too.
Yeah.
But that was a big leap for both Chris and I, and our first kind of taste of the studio system and studio film. It was actually made by this company Alcon, who I'm directing my feature for as well. And they have distribution through Warner Brothers, so that's what kind of set up Chris's Warner Brothers association.
Mm-hmm. And then you, you did a very interesting thing and did a low-budget independent after that. Right.
Then I came back after doing Insomnia, and I had read a script that I really enjoyed, and a filmmaker whose work I liked a lot, Lisa Cholodenko, and she had done. was her first one? High Art. Thank you very much. At a film festival, of course. Yeah, she had done High Art, and I thought it was a great film, and so read the screenplay for Laurel Canyon and really enjoyed it, and met a young Christian Bayle on that film, and continued to work with him for another 10 years.
Yes, and I think I heard you mention that you introduced him to Christopher Nolan.
Well, in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
I had been, while Chris was in post on Insomnia, I was doing Laurel Canyon, and he asked me what I thought of Christian. I told, that he was wonderful, and we were getting really close, and said the same thing to Christian. Said, hey, Nolan's asking about you. You guys really should meet, and you should hook up, and they did eventually, clearly.
Yeah, very good.
And, yeah. So.
Well, we're going to take a look at Laurel Canyon. That's the first print that we have.
Yeah, so I'll set that up a little bit. As we said, this is a film I did I guess we did in 2001, I think. Shot on 30. Everything you see is shot on 35 millimeter. I don't shoot any digital. Haven't yet. So this is 185. I think we made Laurel Canyon for about $7 million, and shot this in about 35 days or something. I don't know. I feel like at a film festival, I always have to say what the budget was and how many days you shot it.
Yeah, it's good. I think they're happy to hear that.
But I really enjoyed this film, and really it had the whole point of what we were doing was to capture the flavor of Laurel Canyon, and it's an area that I live in, and the whole spirit of that is part of what the theme of the film is. So I think what we're going to do here is we're showing the first reel of 3 different films, right. Laurel Canyon being first, all on film, on 35 millimeter prints. So one of the things to note, this was shot on 185, but there are no DIs done on any of these 3 films. These are all film prints off film. Obviously it's a Kodak thing, so I'm happy to brag about that, but they're all film finishes, shot on film, processed and printed on film with no DI. Which I feel pretty strongly about because it's less manipulation of it, and it's also a higher resolution that way. So,
do you know? I'll just very quickly say that recently the AFI gave you a recognition award. It was broadcast in front of Shirley MacLaine's.
Yeah, I don't think my part's going to be broadcast. I think Shirley.
When I ran into him on the red carpet there, and we very briefly talked about why we wanted to screen the first reels of the film, and it's literally where everything is introduced to you. The feel and texture, the environment, the characters, the story. Along those lines, with Laurel Canyon, we can also comment.
I'll remember when I see it because I have no
exactly.
idea what the first shot of the movie is.
Let's comment on that afterwards.
But it is a good point. I think the first
Yeah.
reel is a great way to look at something. To me, when I'm prepping a movie, the first shot of the movie is always incredibly important, and the beginning of the setup, because that's where the audience is really absorbing and focused on what you're putting up there. So I think in all 3 of these pictures, we're showing 20 minutes of Laurel Canyon, then 20 minutes of Insomnia, then 20 minutes of Inception. So
good. So things to keep in mind when you're taking a look at it. Also, the way that this is structured, obviously, is we do a little talking, we see the film, and then after we see that reel, it's your opportunity to ask questions. And so all the Kodak focuses are really an opportunity for you to interact and to have an opportunity to ask questions of.
And to try to sell you film.
And but we won't be able to see you because the lights are right on us, so you'll have to really speak up when we get to that point. Great. So we're ready to roll Laurel Canyon. Laurel Canyon.
I don't know how I forgot that the first shot is a porn. 2 bedroom scenes in one clip reel.
One thing I was just mentioning to Wally when we were taking a look at it is that there's probably a lot of people here who've been to film school and, of course, taken film history classes, and there's 2 shots in here that remind me of Italian realism, in particular Germany on a Zero, where the camera's in one place and the actors are moving around, and in their movement you get the medium shot and the close-up and everything that you need for a scene, but you're staying in one place. And That obviously happened at the pool with the mother and the son, and then in the bedroom.
Bedroom scene too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, looking at this and sort of remembering, I mean, first of all, it's an incredible cast in there to see, you know.
Yeah.
I forgot about Alessandra Nivola and of course, Frances McDormand and Kate Beckinsale, as well as Christian.
And she had just she had won the Academy Award.
Yeah, she'd won for
Fargo.
Fargo just a couple years
Yeah.
before, I guess. But yeah, that was part of what made this movie, I think, kind of fun. And
But we should mention it's a Sundance Institute lab project, and it premiered at Sundance.
oh
Film
yeah, it
Festival
was.
that
Yeah, that's
year.
right. It was in competition at Sundance that year in 2001 or 2002 or something. But to get back to what you were saying, in our pre-production, Lisa and I really we're on track in terms of the references. That one of the first things we watched was The Graduate, and then we watched a few other kind of 70s films, and obviously it really has the feel of a period piece, not only the fact that it's 10 years old now or 11 years old, but we really wanted to embrace that spirit, and part of it were these conversations of letting the characters play within the frame, and I think that's a difference that you'll see when we see the two following pictures, the Chris Nolan movies, two of the Chris Nolan movies, is that Chris and I are always moving the camera. We're always tracking along the people, and so it was a very different language than that which I employ with Chris. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's refreshing seeing this and not having done that in a long time. And I was very conscious to let them play within that frame and part of the restriction of the environment. And I think we start to move the camera a little bit later on in reels later on when things get a little out of control. And that was part of the philosophy, was in the beginning, to just sit back and absorb the environment, and then to start to move things a bit.
And then also, I'll point out that in the reviews that I read of this film, they always commented on how wonderful the cinematography was, but it also captured the essence of Laurel Canyon.
Well, that's what that to me. I was getting slightly embarrassed. We were showing the whole front end credits on the picture, but there's some interesting notes in that as well. Catherine Hardwick was the production designer on that, who of course is a director now, and Cindy Evans was the costumer on this. I forgot that. She's my costumer on the movie that I'm doing now. So a lot of the same people, we all kind of gravitate and work together. But yeah, that was the point of that whole opening, was to set up the whole vibe there. And clearly, this, as I said, we shot this movie in 2001, but we were definitely going for a 1967 vibe in what we were doing. And I think everything, including the opticals on the titles. If the film looked very grainy on the titles, it's because they're opticals. It was before titles were being done digitally, so it really makes it look like 16 when you go down that many generations. But strangely, that plays into the whole vibe of this film. That whole opening sequence should have a very, summer of love kind of feel to it, and that sets up not only the environment in Laurel Canyon and what we wanted to say, but clearly the environment with with Frances's character.
Great. I don't think we have microphones in the audience, so if you
Yell
want
it
to
out.
ask a question, you'll yell it out and I'll repeat it. Or if you're in the...
There's somebody over there
Great.
frantically
Yeah.
waving.
Since this is focusing a lot on film, in film school, I heard a great story about, on this movie, a camera fell in the pool, and you guys were able to save all the film.
Yeah.
But I want to hear from your point of view.
And everyone could hear that question. He asked about...
Yeah, we did dunk a camera in that. Yeah,
he
that's
said
right.
that he heard the story that a camera fell into the pool.
Yeah, there's an old trick if you drop. Well, the old trick in the ocean is you always keep distilled water nearby in case you drop a camera into salt water. You immediately dump it in a tank of distilled water, which won't rust any of the parts, and you can save the film. And my camera system, my focus puller, Bob Hall, who's still with me now, who's been working with me for about 18 years, was on the camera when that happened. We had some crazy rig hanging over the swimming pool, and fell in, and we grabbed the camera and managed to save the film. Yeah, it doesn't really cause any, even if the water hits the film itself, it might have caused spots or something, but it wouldn't cause any other kind of damage. Flashing the film would, but really my guys knew what to do when that happened. But yeah, good anecdote. I forgot about that.
That's great. Anyone else? Yeah? Okay.
Because you have such a profound reputation, do you sometimes worry that you won't live up to it with your next film?
Yeah, that's why I'm getting out of the business.
Do you know, so his question is, he asked about that you have such a profound reputation. Are you concerned about not living up to it on the next film?
It's interesting. I think that's not one of my concerns. I'm always very critical of my own work, and I can review my own work, and I can pick out the flaws and see, what it is that I didn't like about, the way I lit something or the way I shot something. But I don't really, I'm not really concerned about that as I go into a picture. What I'm more concerned about, well, it's not really a concern, but what I try to challenge myself to do, and I very much did that going into Dark Knight Rises, is to not fall back on my crutches, to not go back on what's easy, and not to fall into habits, and to try to challenge myself to do something that I hadn't done before, approach something in a different way, and even if it means failure. I think that's a really important part of filmmaking, is not to be afraid to fail. I don't think you're going to do any kind of interesting work if you're too scared to, and you fall into convention. I think you'll get noticed more if you have the nerve to be able to experiment a little bit and not be as derivative. And I think that's why Chris Nolan's films in particular are so prolific.
Great. We'll do this one and you next. Yeah.
When you go to light a scene, do you know exactly what you're looking for, or do you go and adapt to what you find on set?
So he's asking about lighting a scene.
Yeah, the question is, do I know what I'm looking for when I go to light a scene, or do I adapt on set? I think it's more the latter, but you have to be prepared. For instance, it's great to have an example that we've just seen, the living room scene with all those guys doing bongs on the couch there. We shot that in a house actually in Santa Monica, not in Laurel Canyon. It's kind of a difficult challenge on those wide shots to keep the lights out of the shot. They're all, they're lights outside of that window, so you do all kinds of tricks to try to hide those. I knew we were going to have to do a wide shot, so you're thinking in advance, okay, we have to be prepared to put lights outside the window to undersling them so we can hide them, because I know we're going to see a wide shot of that room. Having said that, it really depends on the rehearsal. And what's most important is to see a blocking rehearsal. See where everybody's going to sit, how Christian and Kate were planning on walking the room, whether Fran was going to stay seated or stand up. Obviously, she was going to stand up and greet them, or whether they were going to go to her or she was going to go to them. So a lot of these things you can anticipate, but you really, I don't have any plan set in stone until I see an actor rehearsal. But the anticipation will save you tons of time. You can usually consider those things, like by thinking them through and knowing how a scene's going to play out. You can do it on paper to a degree as well. But really, everything begins with a rehearsal with the actors.
And in your preparation with Lisa, did you storyboard?
No, we didn't do any storyboarding. I'm not a big storyboard fan. Chris hates them. We only storyboard so that he can get visual effects bids, basically. But I think that's because we understand the language of the camera, frankly. I mean, we kind of know where the camera belongs and where we think it should go, at least based on our own taste. So don't really need a guideline in that way. I started out that way. I actually preferred, oddly, shot lists over storyboards, because it was kind of seemed to make more sense to me to have it in words and with the script, and then let the visuals happen their own way. But having said that, we work very, very fast, and nobody seemed to request shot lists or storyboards from us, because we're always ahead of schedule. So we kind of figure out. And I don't think, Lisa and I didn't do any storyboarding, maybe some shot listing.
Great. There was a question here, yeah?
You obviously filmed the Batman films in like major cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and Pittsburgh.
Did you just call Pittsburgh a major city? I'm kidding, it is.
I was wondering, how do you make those cities have the Gotham City feel? whatever it's based on the comics or based on how Christopher Nolan wants to tell the story?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we make cities other than Gotham look like Gotham City? Well, Gotham is New York City, and really, if we had our way, you know, we would have closed down all of New York City and moved everybody out for a few weeks and shot all the exteriors in New York City. That's really sort of what you're trying to put on the screen. But not being able to do that in New York, you actually find this sort of hybrid based on other cities. We shot 3 Batman films, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and now Dark Knight Rises. The first 2 were the first one was almost entirely shot in England. We shot it on stages and in the countryside of outside of London. With the exception of a 3-week action sequence in Chicago. The second one, Dark Knight, we shot half in England and half in Chicago. So we basically shot all the stage work in England and all the location work in Chicago. So in that example, Chicago was playing as Gotham City and served us really well. We kind of shot it out between those 2 pictures, though. So coming around for the 3rd time, Chris really didn't want to visit Chicago again. And we had great success shooting Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles on Inception. We shot quite a bit of Inception, you know, within a half a mile of where we were sitting right now in the downtown streets and Wilshire and Figueroa and down there. So we had great luck with the action sequences there. So really in this one, in Dark Knight Rises, Gotham became a hybrid of a bit in New York City. We used New York City for the bridges. We shot Wall Street. And then we shut down quite a bit of Pittsburgh and did all our big scenes that required larger streets in Pittsburgh. And then we did a bunch of big night exterior work here in Los Angeles, which made a lot of sense, mostly economically, because you can't close down that large of an area in New York or in Los Angeles, you know, what we did in Pittsburgh. And here you have all the resources. So to do big night exterior work in Los Angeles is terrific because they're accustomed to it, and you've got all the equipment and the fantastic crew here. So
Great. Let's do
this
one.
gent's been trying.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Hi. When you're doing coverage of a scene, when you have 3 or 4 more actors, let's say you got the master shot and you want to get the close-ups of everybody's dialogue. Do you shoot a complete shot of the whole scene again and close-up for each actor, or do you get pieces of the person, each actor's dialogue? Do you go for the reaction shots? And also, when you do that, do you go to a telephoto lens, or you just move the camera in with the lens that you got?
So the question is, and that once again is a great example, the group shot on the couch there. He's asking if, when we cover a scene like that, if we do a master shot and then pop in on every actor for every bit of the scene, and whether we use a telephoto lens or whether we move the camera in. So really, there are a lot of variables in the answer to that if you're doing your job right. In a situation like Laurel Canyon, and also one of the variables is how experienced the director is. If the director really knows exactly what they're going to use in the cutting room, there's really no point in doing coverage on every actor on the couch. I think off the couch, there's Fran and there's Alessandro, and the other 3 don't really have any dialogues. I think there's one line from a guy. So I think right off the bat, part of it also depends, once the director has some idea of what he or she is going to use in the cutting room, you'll decide how to spend your time. Because obviously, if you're going to do coverage on every single character, if you're going to do singles and 2 shots, it's going to cost you a lot of time. And you're going to burn through your day. I think what's important is to go back to your blueprint, to go to the screenplay and kind of look at it and say, what are you saying here? Where are the connections? The connections between, primarily in this case, between, you know, Fran McDormand's character and Christian Bale's character. So you're gonna make that your priority, connecting those 2 characters, and then also Alessandro's character. We start to understand in this scene is perhaps a lover of his mom. So you want to get a connection there too, and you want to get an idea of what else is going on. Obviously, you're going to get the close-up of the bong, right? Because it's a big part of what they're observing when they come in the room. And then what also was important was Kate's close-up, because she, in this film, plays, pretty prim and proper, person who's being exposed to these evils. So really that's the blueprint right there in terms of how you're going to cover that. Once again, whether you use a telephoto lens or whether you're moving in close on a wider lens depends on whose point of view it is. In this case, it really is, you're pretty much with Christian and Kate as they walk into that space. So it does make a lot of sense to do that on a telephoto lens, to stay back with them. You don't have to be literal about that. You can move in a little bit. But really you want to play that as if it's their observation. So logic there dictates that you have the camera back with those two characters. So those are the reasons for doing that. Obviously, there's so many variables from one film to another, from one, scene to another. If you're connecting two characters together, you make certain you get that two shot. But it's a good question.
Yeah, it was a very good question.
And a long answer.
Yeah, no, can we take one more? And I've seen your hand go up several times. And then we can do more questions after the next reel.
My question is, as your career has progressed, you kind of have moved with Christopher Nolan many times from these more intimate indie films to these spectacular blockbusters. And my question is, what I've noticed is that even in these blockbusters, with the sense of spectacle, there are these really beautifully shot, intimate moments. And though not as big a blockbuster, one shot in Moneyball, that is just one of my favorite shots from that film, is when Brad Pitt is sitting alone in the stadium, and you have the entire, and it's a really shallow depth of field, and you have this really big sense of intimacy in this really expansive shot. So I'm wondering if you consciously try to reconcile that sense of intimacy with this sense of spectacle.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's part of the balance of it, and that's why I chose to do movies like Laurel Canyon and then Moneyball, 10 years later, because of the intimacy in those films and because of the contrast to the films I've done with Nolan. Yeah, there was and I love the way that part of the film plays out. It's the very beginning of the movie, and it's got Brad turning on and off a radio in the empty stadium, and his team is on the road where they're losing, and he's listening to it on the radio. And what's fun is there's no dialogue or no monologue. There's no real sound in that scene until he passes by the guard, and then there's just a brief exchange, and then he's in his car in the parking lot. And once again, very similar to Laurel Canyon, that film had a very 70s kind of approach to it and feel to it. In terms of the sparse dialogue early on, and in terms of the feel of it. And Bennett and I talked quite a bit about, once again, about these films of the 70s. And one of the films we looked at for that was All the President's Men. And it's got spectacular work by Gordon Willis in it, and it's just a really powerful, well-directed film. And so that was sort of a template for that, so that it's not coincidental that the films, other than Nolan films, have a similar thing. I've only done, in the last 13 years, I've only done 3 films without Chris Nolan. That's Laurel Canyon, The Italian Job, and Moneyball. And there's a reason for doing everything. Italian Job was really because I wanted to get the action stuff that came before the Batman pictures, so that was my first foray into big action stuff.
Now would be probably a good time to talk about the film school that you're doing with Bayle and Papa Michael.
Oh yeah, we started an online film school, and they told me I had to plug it. So, myself and Janusz Kaminski and Fade and Papa Michael are doing an online thing. It hasn't been launched yet, but it's called AdvancedFilmmaking.com, and it's a we're beginning with the 3 of us sitting in a kind of a round table discussion, talking about our histories and our histories together, and the different directors that we've worked with and the different approaches to things. And we agree and we disagree. And we shot about 12 hours of this round table discussion, and that's going to begin the piece. And then we're going to go into individual interviews and talk to some of the people we work with, and and put a whole thing together within the next year or so. But yeah, it should be kind of fun.
And Insomnia is the second film you did with Christopher.
Yeah,
but
Insomnia.
it's the first studio film. So did
Yeah,
that,
it's technically speaking, it's Alcon, which is a kind of a mini studio. You know, they're kind of similar to a Summit Lionsgate kind of company. They this film we did, I think it was about $40 million film, $46 million film. So it was a big leap for Chris and I, going from $5 million film on Memento to this budget size, and Al Pacino, and so we shot the whole thing in Canada in 2000, I think, and so yeah, it was a big jump for us. And the opening scene of this picture we shot over the glaciers in northern British Columbia and Alaska. The film takes place in Alaska, and for me it was a fun study because it took place, and I think that'll probably be in this reel with the endless night. It took place in the summer in Alaska where it stays light through the night. So that's one of the themes of the picture, and I think, and you'll see a difference in clarity on this from a technical standpoint, because this is shot in anamorphic 35, and Laurel Canyon was 1A5, regular 35, so there's widescreen, and I don't think there's anything more I can say about it.
well, I just have one quick question, though.
Yeah.
I know you've spoken in the past about how you prepare for a film with Christopher, and that you actually screen prints from other films. And so was that part of the process right away with working on Memento and then on this film? Or did you develop that process?
I think
over
we
time?
developed that process probably. I don't think we started watching movies sort of, it was kind of a thing to do for fun inspiration. We started doing it probably around Batman Begins. Just watching, basically the rule is that any one of us can pick a movie. It's usually Chris and myself, but also the production designer Nathan, Crowley could, choose a film, editor Lee Smith. We'd all sort of choose a film that we thought would be fun to screen before starting our film, and there are really no rules as to why we would choose that film. Dark Knight Rises, Chris chose Battle of Algiers, and we watched that. And I think there is a correlation in film. I chose a Sidney Lumet picture called Prince of the City, which is just a really dark, grim masterpiece. And but we just choose films that we think inspire us in some way, and whether there's a direct correlation or not. So I can't remember if we watched anything before Insomnia. I didn't want to watch the original. This film is a remake of a Norwegian film of the same title, and I didn't want to watch it. I didn't want to be influenced one way or another by the film. So
Great. Should we take a look at it?
yeah.
Let's watch Insomnia.
20 minutes of it.
We're just going to jump into your questions really quickly. Yes, please go ahead.
There are moments like quick shots of the girl sort of like Al Pacino's like remembering or trying to visualize her. She smiles, she holds onto her necklace. That thing is sort of like reminiscent of Terrence Malick's work. Is that someone whose work you follow?
Bingo. It's very much a Nolan thing. I mean, but Chris, yeah. Oh, sorry. The question, or the statement was that the flashbacks during the autopsy scene reminded this gentleman of a Terrence Malick film. And Chris is a huge Malick fan, and I think that we made this shortly after Thin Red Line. And I know Chris loved that film, so I'm sure it's a bit derivative. But we did something like that in Memento as well. There are flashbacks to the wife when he's talking about the wife, and so it's a language that Chris really loves. I think that all of our films together have some element of that, and generally that material is all kind of handheld and a little bit abstract in a natural way, flares, but all to evoke emotion,
Well, Well, but along the lines of introducing the characters, he's using that obviously to show you the mindset of the director in the beginning with the flashbacks. We talked about that.
Well, the mindset of Will's character and how astute he is, and what a great detective he is. But I think that one of the things that I note in doing this, and look, this is one of the great examples of the brilliance of Chris Nolan this is what we're seeing the beginning of the first act of each of these films. And so Chris, in his way, has done it all in the first 20 minutes of this picture. He's established the location, the fact that they're out in the middle of nowhere, that they're isolated. He's established each of these characters. He's established that they're in trouble back where they're coming from, and set up the tension between them. All of those elements, and then we've gotten a glimpse of the fact that it's 10 o'clock at night and at midnight sun. So all of these things come to play in the second and third act of the film as well. So it's just really great craftsmanship, and also the curiosity of the local detective, which comes to play later on as well. She's the one that kind of figures out what's going on with them.
I can only see the hands being raised here. Is there anyone above? Yeah, way up there?
There's somebody way back.
Do you consider how the scenes are going to be edited together, how the shots are going to be edited together in the scene? And do you ever think, well, it's going to look one way, and then you see the final edit and you're like, oh wow, this is quite a bit different? And the reason why I asked that question is the scene when they first go into the police station, it felt really cutty, and I'm just wondering, is that the way you thought it would be, or what was your opinion on that?
Yeah, Chris tends to cut quickly in the beginning of the film because he wants to get a lot of information in there, and it never felt particularly cutty to me, that part, but it was a different editor than, that was Dodie Dorn cut this picture, and she cut Memento as well. Every film subsequently was cut by Lee Smith. But that's very much a Nolan thing. I don't know if it was cut anymore. There are some films that feel a little faster in the beginning than I thought they were going to be paced and cut, but that's Chris's, style, really. I think that I pretty much know what they're going to use. Chris and I know as we're shooting the scene what he's going to use. There's not a lot of waste. There's not a lot of slop. I would say that 90% of the material that we shoot in terms of not takes but scenes end up on the screen. So there's always something that's a little different than what you expected, but with Nolan it's always a pleasant surprise, I think. I'm always sort of elevated by the film when I see it. It's more than I thought it was going to be.
There's someone way back there. We'll do that person in the middle.
Question about aerial photography. How involved are you in that? You use a lot now.
Yeah, I'm very involved in that. In fact, we've used the same aerial DP. Oh, sorry, the question was about aerial photography. And we've used the same aerial DP, Hans Bierno, for since that film. So both the aerial sequences you saw, the glaciers over Alaska and Insomnia, and then the shots going through Laurel Canyon, is the same team. It's Hans Bierno shooting it, and Craig Hosking flying the aircraft, and really I've done maybe 10, 12 movies with that team. So, and Chris and I are heavily involved in the material that ends up in his films. Often for other directors, I think on Laurel Canyon, I went up alone with Hans and Craig, and we got the material. Sometimes we send them up alone, but they've been working with us for so long that there is a bit of a there's a lot of trust there. But Chris and I generally try to go up with them. It is important in the case of these two films. It really is developing the language of the picture and kind of setting up the first act. So it's storytelling.
Piggybacking off of that, how did you contribute to Marley, the documentary about Bob Marley? Was that the Aerial Photography man as well?
Oh, yeah. He was asking how I contributed to Marley, the documentary Marley. I didn't contribute much. I'm a huge Bob Marley fan, and so funny enough, it was a DP, Alvin Kutcher, his kid is in the same school as my kid, and he shot quite a bit of that documentary. And I also knew Kevin McDonald, the director, and I heard that they were doing this, and I told Alvin, I said, you know, if you ever need any help on this, I'm a huge Bob Marley fan, and so I shot one day on it. I shot one interview with a bass player on it. But I don't know if you haven't seen this documentary yet, Marley, it's spectacular. I'm a huge Bob Marley fan, and that's why I, you know, approached them about doing it. And the last half hour of the film is just devastating. I mean, the whole film is really fascinating, but the last half hour is just devastating because he really should still be alive today, you know. But if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend seeing it.
A little known fact is that Wally is a musician. Just wanted to mention that. And he has performed live, actually. Why don't we go to this side of the room, in the back there?
You're a cinematographer who tends to live in the shadows, and you're not afraid of darkness, and that's something I really appreciate and I like, and you tend to underexpose a little bit. What are some of your inspirations as a cinematographer, especially when developing this kind of style of your own?
I think when the question is that I'm dark. I mean, the statement was that I'm dark, that my cinematography is dark, and the question is what, I guess I'm going to translate your question as what are my influences in that. And really, the first influence I had, and once again going back to the films of the 70s, and watching films like All the President's Men, Godfather 1, Godfather 2, Manhattan. There's a common thread there in cinematography, which is one guy, Gordon Willis, and that stuff, that kind of naturalistic but moody cinematography, lighting, is really what inspired me, and really what, you know, made me want to become a cinematographer. So I would say more than anything else, that one cinematographer really. And the other thing about Gordon is, he didn't just work with Francis Coppola. He worked with Woody Allen. He worked with Alan Pakula. He worked with a number of fantastic filmmakers in the 70s, but always contributed something to the story. It wasn't just the look of it. The look is powerful and you know, augments the story. But he was a storyteller himself with his photography, and that's the best we can hope to strive for.
Is there a question on this side? Yeah.
Hi, I'm an actress, and in my opinion, as long as there's film, there's work for me. My question is, what advice would you give to the cinematographers and filmmakers in this room about working with actors, and just your, I guess, assessment as far as, because I know for me, I show up on a set, I know my lines, I do it, it's done, but that's the way it is. But
well, that's a great question about working with actors, because you're about to direct a film.
Yeah. The question was, what advice would you give to actors, and you know, it's, and how, look, it's critical to me. And as Lorette said, I'm getting ready to direct my first film, and really all I care about right now is the screenplay and the performances that will you know, translate that. The visuals are coming second and third, and they're not as important as the performances. So it's absolutely, you know, critical. And I think that the question comes at a good time after watching this performance, after watching, you know, Al Pacino up on the screen, and you know, Al's performance in this picture just gets more layered and layered, and he's phenomenal, you know, all the way through the film. And I think that is the key to the credibility of a film. Once the screenplay is in place, and you know, the story is the way it should be, you know, it is up to the performer and the director leading that performer to give that film credibility, and to hook an audience in, and to move them emotionally. So it's absolutely critical. And I have a great deal of respect for actors and, you know, and their craft.
So I'm just going to jump in. We'll do questions after the next reel. I think one thing I noticed about your work is you're consistently good, no matter which director you work with.
Gee, thanks.
No, well, I mean, you.
I don't think so, but yeah.
It does make a big difference who you work with, but I think when I mentioned that to you, your immediate response was that you take the story very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly the approach is always about how to tell this story.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I will tip my hat to, you know, the film school that I went to AFI at the time that I went there, which was 1988, you know. Certainly what was drilled into our heads was that story is king, and the story comes first, and you know, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage, and that really is true. And now that I've moved into a different area, and I'm writing right now a bit, and preparing to direct a film, it really is the most important thing is to have that narrative the way it should be, and that applies to everybody's translation of it. And that's how I always saw films as a cinematographer. I saw it, you know, the cinematography is not an opportunity to grandstand and to show that I had some style, but to see how I could elevate the story, how I could augment and you know, help the director translate, you know, that story in visual terms. So I think that's the most important thing that I, you know, can impart to cinematographers, is really to pay attention to what's going on in that story and not be concerned about you know, how your work is going to look and how it's going to look to your peers, but what is the appropriate way to tell that story, and what's the appropriate way to light it.
Excellent. And then since we're going to look at Insomnia next, sorry, Inception.
Yeah. Another movie.
Yeah, I always confuse the two, but not the films. They're very different. But Inception, I mean, you chose to shoot some segments on 65 millimeter, some on 35.
Yeah.
It's a story within a story within a story.
You know what, since you didn't plug your company, I'm going to do it for a second before we move on to that. But Insomnia, the one thing to really note in seeing this stunning film print, and that is anamorphic 35 millimeter film, and that was shot almost 10 years ago as well, and there really is no better image quality up there. And while these digital cameras are trying to chase down and be as good as this look, if you cut this immediately with any of the digital cameras, you'd see a huge difference. And as these cameras strive to be 4K or 5K, the anamorphic negative, really to gain all the resolution, would have to be scanned in at 8K to be able to see all the color depth that you're seeing up there, all the sharpness. So I'm just going to say it now. The way that Chris Nolan and I feel is that it's a tragedy if our film is being taken away from us, and those of us who choose to shoot film should still be able to. Sadly, it seems more and more people are shooting digital, and we really like to try to keep film alive and be able to continue to shoot. I plan on shooting my film that I'm directing on film, and I know a lot of filmmakers out there like Paul Thomas Anderson and Chris are fighting, and Quentin are fighting hard to keep it alive, and regardless of the budget. And as I said, I shot a film in 1997. It was a $300,000 movie, and we shot it on film, and you know, both Kodak and Panavision helped us meet our budget requirements, but we wouldn't have gotten the same look on digital cameras. Even digital cameras of today just aren't quite there. So I want to be able to shoot in the same way.
Yeah, I can say that there was a study done about 7 years ago, and they were looking at the amount of information in one 35 millimeter frame. And they said it was the equivalent of 12 million pixels.
Mm-hmm.
And then since then, the film has been improved upon. We now have Vision 3 and a new internegative stock as well. That's made a big difference. So I can do a plug every now and then.
Yeah.
It's not my style.
You
though.
can, but I don't. I actually, you know, I don't gain anything financially by plugging film. I just want to continue shooting film. I just think it's the superior medium, and that's one of the reasons I'm here, is to be able to help rally people to shoot on film if you can. And as we said earlier, Lorette will make it possible for you to do that. You'll get great deals from these guys, and try testing if you're doing testing. Try testing Super 16 alongside of your Red camera, and you know, you might find you prefer it. You know. But
Now, in Insomnia, you're starting with very slow motion of the waves. And I know in reading articles about, sorry, Inception.
Inception,
So
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
In reading articles about it, you made a big point about getting special cameras to do the high speed work, and And
Well, we carried for the beginning of this. We tried to shoot a bunch on 65 millimeter, and the entire scene with Ken Watanabe and the dinner scene coming up is shot on 65 millimeter. So you'll see a difference in clarity and sharpness. Not quite like IMAX. There's a difference. 65 millimeter 5 perf is run through a camera in a traditional vertically through the gate, and it's 5 perfs wide. IMAX is 15 perfs and a much larger
And it's sideways.
use, and it's sideways, and it's much larger use of the 65 millimeter negative. So 65 millimeter 5 perf is quite a bit more resolution than the 35, but is so we used it for parts of Inception. And what else can I say about this? I won an Academy Award for my work in this movie, which was fun. Good times. Thanks. And I think it'll be kind of fun watching this in Chris's work as well, seeing once again how he sets up a story, in this case a little more complex than Insomnia in the first act. And I think it'll be interesting because this is the first reel of this film, so it should be 20 minutes. And the first 15 minutes of this film, the first time you see it, is utterly confusing. So it makes it that much more fun as you go through it. But
yeah, you'll notice too, there's no titles, so he stopped using titles in the beginning.
I think Insomnia was the last film that Chris did front-end titles on. Following that, he really wanted to jump straight into the film in the beginning. I told him it's because I know he wanted his name to come up first at the end of the movie, but he denies that. But no, I think he after that he really wanted to get into the story first, which I think is a much better way of doing it and running all the credits at the end. So without further ado,
Let's watch Inception.
Comment on one thing that I noticed. People called this a special, a visual effects movie, and that was 20 minutes of the movie, and the only visual effect in that whole thing was the outside of the train window. Was a green screen outside of the train window. Aside from that, it's all mechanical effects. Everything is, everything's in camera. Yeah, between the slow motion and the water effects and everything else, but. Yeah, there are not that many visual effects in the movie. It's kind of interesting, I think, because of the theme of the picture. People think there are a lot of visual effects, but.
And then you did a film finish.
This is 100% film finish. No DI. Shot on film. All our dailies were on film, and then traditional photochemical timing, color timing with the same color timer, David Orr. And it's a very fast process too. It's faster and cheaper than a DI. As long as we're able to still do it. But I think and also you're not compromising your resolution. Once again, even if you're scanning in at 4K, you're probably getting about half the effective resolution that you get when you do it in a film finish, as you see here.
Now, there's two things I want to mention really quickly. One is your daughter, Claire Julian, is she has a small part in Dark Knight Rises, but she also has a much bigger part in Sofia Coppola's next film.
Yeah, my daughter Claire was, Chris was kind enough to give her a tiny speaking part in Dark Knight Rises, so that's her first screen credit. And then based on that, she started going on readings, and Sofia Coppola cast her as one of the leads in her new movie, The Bling Ring. Yeah. And so we're very proud of her. She's only 17 years old and gave her an excuse to drop out of high school, so we all would have liked that, right?
And then what do you want to mention about the film that you're directing?
Well, there's not much to say about it. We're keeping it kind of under wraps, but we're going to start in the fall or winter of next year, and Chris Nolan and Emma Thomas are producing the film, are executive producers on it. It's being done through Alcon that did Insomnia, and that's how I first met those producers. And I found a script that I really liked a lot. I've been looking for something for a while to direct, and found the script and took it to Chris with my retirement notice and told him that I was going to try another career. And he was very supportive and read the screenplay and eventually agreed to produce it. And Alcon, which is Broderick Johnson and Andrew Kosov, were terrific about wanting to do a picture with me. And once again, we had met on Insomnia, And so 10 years later, we're getting a project off the ground together, and I'm very excited about it. So
Excellent.
yeah.
What we are short on time. Wally will stay around, but there's someone that has a burning question that would like to ask, and we'll go in the front here. Either one of you guys.
For your new film and your directing, are you going to be the DP in that? And if not, what are you going to look for in a DP to be a collaborator with?
The answer to the first question is hell no. Yeah, much as I, might have an idea in mind how I want the picture to look, it is really not my focus, and I want to steer clear of sort of, I'm not going to say steer clear of the visuals, but certainly I don't want to be micromanaging, how somebody lights the film. Having said that, I definitely will be looking for a cinematographer whose style, is I understand. It may not be, completely similar to mine, but whose style that I obviously I like and understand. Beyond that, they got to be fast. I'm gonna do to that cinematographer what Chris Nolan's done to me for 13 years, which is make me work really, really fast. And I think that's an important note. That's an important note on cinematography in general. You have to serve the director, and one of the best ways you can do that is by thinking on your feet and being as efficient with the time and the money as you can be, so the director has more resources to make his film.
But you are shooting and directing commercials.
Yeah, I continue to shoot my own commercials, which I enjoy doing. Yeah, there's one right behind. Yeah. What was the last question? Go ahead over here. Yeah.
Do you typically like for spaces or for really specific points, like do you really like for close-ups, or what's your philosophy over basically approaching spaces?
Yeah, he's asking whether we light spaces, and I wouldn't put it in those terms, but clearly a location has its own inherent characteristics, and one of those characteristics may be the natural light that's in there, or maybe the only way that you can actually light that space. We might put down a foundation for the lighting in a space, but really, once again, you have to watch an actor rehearsal, get some general idea of where the actors are going to go, and have some idea where you're headed with the coverage. And in terms of going from a wide shot in a scene to the close-up, we generally sweeten it up a little bit. I try to get as close as I can in the wide shot to not have to. I certainly don't relight it. Generally, what we do is I'll go in and I'll soften the light a little bit more. If I've lit a scene for a master, in case like in Inception there with Leo in that living room, the night interior in that living room, which is a real background shot right down the street here. You could walk there from here. It's a building on like Olympic and 12th or something. But we lit up some of the exterior there, and so for the wide shot, I have a bank of lights above that window on him. And I think when we went in for the close-up, I probably just put a bit more diffusion between that light and him just to soften it for the closer look. But not much else. I think that's part of the efficiency in what you can do in terms of lighting fast, is kind of minimize how much time passes between the master and the close-ups, and that helps the directors and the actors quite a bit. I'm sorry, again?
Do you use negative fill?
I do, quite a bit. I use a lot of negative. The question was, do you use negative fill? And negative fill being, particularly in day exteriors, bringing in large surfaces of black material to basically take light away. I use that quite a bit to try to get mood and contrast in day exterior work in particular.
Do you look for natural light?
Do I who?
Do you use a lot of natural light?
I do use natural light a lot. I basically, to me, because I consider myself a naturalistic, lighter, I always start with what's there, whether it's a night exterior, in a city, or a day interior inside a building. I look at what's there naturally, and my philosophy has always been, if it looks good when you walk in the room, why would you kick a hole in a Rembrandt? So, so if you can get away with not lighting it, generally you have to light it just to have the consistency throughout the shooting day. But a lot of times I'm just emulating the natural light.
Excellent comment to finish on. You know, at CalArts, they taught us to bring your humanity to the work, and you're clearly an example of that.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, guys.